Mm. Hi, Michelle.
Hello.
I'm trying to adjust the lights. I'm in my Boston studio tonight, so
Oh, lucky you. Today was a good day to be in Boston. It's nice and warm.
trying to get my background straight here.
No problem. Let's see. Patty. Hi, Patty. Hi, Christian.
Hi, everyone.
One, two, three, four, five. I see Lynn, 6. Wait another minute to see if David joins. Patrick wasn't joining, sent a note, he wouldn't be able to join tonight. All right, I think we'll get started. I have 6:32 p.m. Welcome everyone to the Housing Plan Production Advisory Committee meeting tonight. My name is Michelle Capano. I've sent out to our committee members the agenda for tonight. We'll call the meeting to order at 6:32 p.m. Thank you, everyone. Tonight, we will be covering a few interesting items around our deliverables and timelines, feedback from the committee on the housing needs assessment that MAPC has been working on for us. We will be discussing the GLAM Stantec analysis that's been circulated with the committee and look for their input as well. Then we'll take any further questions on the committee and address any next steps, and then certainly cover some new business items. The first is the meeting minutes from November 9th, 2022. Those were circulated to everyone. Hopefully folks have taken an opportunity to review them, and I'm asking if there are any updates or changes to those meeting minutes.
God.
People shaking no. Okay.
I make a motion to approve those minutes, Michelle.
Okay,
Second.
thank you, Mark. And a second from Mike. So we'll do a
Yep.
roll call vote. So Mike,
Aye.
the chair is aye. Mark,
Aye.
Heather,
Hi.
thank you. Patty,
Aye.
Lynn. Lynn, we can't hear you.
Sorry. Aye. Yes.
Thank And I see that Jim joined at 6:34 p.m. Jim, Mark just made a motion to accept the meeting minutes from November. Oops, sorry, my screen changed here. From November 9th, which was our first meeting. I had sent those meeting minutes out for the committee to review. I also asked if anyone has any changes or feedback to those meeting minutes.
No, fine.
No.
Okay,
Aye,
problem.
okay, so Jim is aye, thank you. And David is not present. Okay, thank you. The next is a review of our deliverables and timelines. John was supposed to join us tonight, but he had an unexpected emergency. So we're going to table that for another meeting, and we'll have John come and speak to us. There's been some updates that we need to just cover in terms of timelines and making sure that we are in step in terms of how we're going to meet those deliverables and the calendar, because some work is going to complete this summer. And so we want to make sure that we have all of those things slotted in place.
So
Okay.
can we address any of the nearest time deadlines, even if we don't have the full schedule?
Yes, and that's what we're moving into right now, which is the housing needs assessment and the first community engagement. So
Those
the
are,
next,
those are the only things that'll take place before we meet again, correct?
yes, and I will discuss, whether we'll be able to meet again before the community engagement. We as a committee can certainly meet. And obviously, as a reminder, MAPC has a certain contract with us. So they're only going to be able to meet with us for a certain number of times within that contract. So we'll try to work through any exceptions around that as well. So, so moving on, so review of the housing needs assessment and community feedback. So we had circulated their recent update. Hopefully folks took some opportunity to read through it. We have Christian on today, and Christian will be able to answer some questions, but maybe other questions may need to get deferred, and we'll have to follow up with John. So I wanted to open it up to the committee on the housing needs assessment and just kind of walk through the findings on the assessment, preview of the takeaways that were documented, and then discuss any questions, concerns. Are we comfortable with the narratives that have been outlined in terms of how Nahant has been described, the characteristics? Was there anything that stuck out that we felt like needs to be changed?
I didn't see anything that needs to be changed, but it strikes me that a lot of the demographic analysis, while it's very helpful and informative, doesn't change the fact that we have a housing, an affordable, a subsidized housing stock of 48 units, and we need 161 or 162. Have I got that right?
Mhm.
Okay, and that is the case, even if all of the demographics that were presented in the report were different, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
I will just add, and also, I think John sends us regards. He actually was flying over Nahant on Tuesday and took some really great pictures from the airplane, which I'm happy to share with the committee. But he's sad not to be here, so I'll try my best to answer questions. But of course, I'm not the housing planner on this project, so I won't be able to answer some of the more technical stuff. But just to mention that the demographic analysis is just like a really standard component of our housing needs assessments, but you're right, it doesn't necessarily change the calculation of units that you need to provide.
I didn't mean to disparage it. I just wanted to make sure
no.
what its effect is.
Yeah, it's just part of the requirements of doing something like that.
Oh, actually, there's one thing that came up recently that I didn't see addressed. In addition to the requirement to cover the distance between 48 currently subsidized units and 161 or 162, there is I understand, an opportunity available to the town to achieve its 40B safe harbor status by setting aside a certain percentage of the square footage of the town for
Land.
land subsidized housing. Do you understand that to be correct?
I am not. I probably do not have the accurate enough information in order to be able to answer that question.
Is anyone else informed in such a way as to be able to confirm that or contradict it?
Mike, I believe you're correct. And it's something I think that's on our agenda tonight, Michelle, to discuss.
Okay.
But
Okay.
before we get to that, I just want to mention that, that's one component of perhaps one component of the housing production plan. The housing production plan is much bigger and broader than just sort of the glam analysis. So I think we should keep our focus on that as we move forward, and not necessarily whether or not we can meet some sort of threshold by a stroke of a pen or something along those lines. I think it's important to get through the housing production plan. That certainly may play a role in it as we move forward, but it's only one element of it.
I would just like to say that I really appreciated seeing this report. I think it's eye-opening for a lifelong resident like myself to see that, 40% of our community is considered low income. I think moving forward, I hope people look at this report in the community, but I think moving forward, we really need to emphasize that just because Nahant seems to be this very affluent community, that we are an aging community, that this isn't all about, I think the word affordable housing, just people have a certain feeling about that. And it is essential housing. So I think, we need to emphasize that. We really need to kind of really have our community believe what's in this report, because you don't see something like this very often. Like, it was eye-opening to me, even though I have personal experiences with my dad and his housing. But I think a lot of people in town still just can't really comprehend that we're no different than any other community that's in this crisis. So I definitely appreciate this report, and I hope that the community really does take a look at it, and maybe, Mark, you and the selectmen can go over it a little bit, and just to emphasize to the people watching that these are real numbers and this is really happening.
That's great. Thanks, Heather. I agree. I thought it was eye-opening as well. It's important that, the committee had time to review this. I don't know if we want to finalize this tonight and take a vote to approve it and then publish it, or do that at a later meeting. My hope was to get consensus that we can, I don't know, we'll have to consult with the town administrator, at least get the draft report published and available so residents can review it in advance of the community engagement meeting. But I welcome feedback on, what the best practice would be for this.
Well,
Michelle,
go ahead.
I was just going to say, is there any way that we can respond in writing, or do we just have to talk openly online?
Jim, I will say that you can respond directly to John. And because he's not here, I thought that some of you might have more extensive comments than what would be reasonable to cover or more detailed comments, at least, than what we would want to cover here. And so if you do have that, John has suggested that you send an email directly to him.
And would he then share that those points that may be raised with the rest of the committee?
I'm not sure that I'm not sure what John's approach to that would be, whether or not he would be sharing that with the rest of the committee, but I'm assuming that if there are substantive changes that you would like to make, that at the very least John would want to implement those and then share that updated draft back with the committee for subsequent discussion. So I can't speak for what John would prefer for you to do, but I think I do know that he would prefer that you just, with those types of extensive comments, you send them directly to him by email so that he can have access to them and be able to implement those or respond to you with information if some of those are questions.
So before
Okay.
we act on this report, I'd like to get a little bit more from Mark about what he was referring to having to do with the housing production plan.
It's the housing production meeting in Nahant. I'm just watching.
Put it, can somebody
She's
mute
on mute.
themselves? Okay. So, Mark, you alluded to some other effects other than with respect to the 40B issue and the MBTA issue in reference to my comment about the report we've been discussing. So can you fill us in about the significance of this report, putting those two initial issues to one side?
What report are we talking about, Mike?
Yeah.
The
Are we talking
glaring-
about the housing needs assessment?
Yeah.
I was responding to your comment about the document that we shared with committee members regarding the GLAM analysis.
Right.
So is it missing something here?
We're discussing whether or not to take a vote
Okay,
on the report that we just got from the contractor.
right.
So,
So my-
and go ahead.
So, I mean, I think I'll follow up on what Michelle said. I think it's important that this report, either in draft form or in final version, if we can agree on it tonight, be available to the public prior to our public engagement. I think it's an important element of that, and I think people need to be educated, as we all are. So whether it's in draft form or whether it's in final form, I think we need to get it out.
May I make a suggestion? Michelle, could you put it on the screen so everyone could see specifically what is being discussed here?
Okay, give me 1 second.
Actually, this document is probably already a public record and subject to being sought by the public with the public records request.
Yes, I was going to say, Michael, that, MAPC is a public agency, so all of our work is subject to public record. So
Well,
this is
even-
technically already part of the public record, but I know that you've also already received it as a public entity, so.
Right, so it
Mhm.
would have the same public records status, even if you guys were a private entity. Correct?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
I think the difference is, are we endorsing this? I believe that that's the question in front of us.
And what I said, Lynn, earlier is we can either endorse it as a draft,
Right.
or endorse it as a final.
So hopefully folks can see my screen.
Yes,
And we
thank
can
you,
go
Michelle.
page by page. The first paragraphs are kind of the introduction and the executive summary of the preview of the key takeaways. Then we go into how the assessment began, population, household characteristics. There's also some key references about the census data and how this data was compiled. So I think that's an important distinction. As for any reader to, when you see these numbers, how did this all come together? Where did the information come from?
Well, I'm not sure what the practical or legal effect is of any of action by the committee as to this report. I would suggest that the simple action is we simply accept it and make it available to the public as it is, because it is an existing work product from our consultant. And that leaves open the option for people in future to drill a little deeper on it and fine tune it the next time we gather, so that we don't need to get too hung up on it at this time.
And are members of the committee comfortable that we recommend publishing the draft document so it is available for the community engagement knowing that we still will have some additional feedback that may come into the committee from committee members to MAPC, and then there will be a follow-up vote to finalize the document.
Makes sense.
Yes,
I
That
make
makes
that
sense.
motion.
yes.
Second,
And Mike seconds. We'll do a roll call vote on the motion. The motion is to accept the draft document of the housing needs assessment from MAPC in order to publish it in advance for the community engagement meeting. That will be held on March 8th. So Mike,
aye.
Mark,
Aye.
Heather,
I,
Lynn,
Yes,
Patty,
Aye, but there's one word that's missing on page 3. We're missing the word home before May. I was like, what?
It's just a draft.
Caught that
It's just
too,
a
so-
draft.
I
Save it.
know, it's me being a stickler for grammar.
Nope, that's good. So Jim,
Yep.
David,
Yes.
thank you. And the chair is aye. Okay, excellent. All right. So I am to. Stop sharing. Great. All right. So then the next item on the agenda is the plans for the community engagement on March 8th. So we've confirmed with Town Hall that we can have that date. A couple of items that come to mind are time, how long we want to hold the community engagement for. This is going to be an in-person meeting. So we're working with Town Hall to make sure we have, all the necessary AV equipment in place. We will be able to live stream it, but we won't be able to provide members of the community to participate, via Zoom, just because we know we've had some logistic issues right now. So we'll do it in person, but then we'll plan a future community engagement where we can do it in a virtual manner. Or subset hybrid manner, maybe in one of the conference rooms in Town Hall, so other members of the community can participate as well. So the date is March 8th. What time do we think we want to hold the community engagement? Typically, I know we've done like 7 to 9. Do we want to do earlier? Do we want to push it to 7:30? What are people's indications on that?
I like
Is it
7:30.
like really not Zoom. We're not gonna, I mean.
Yeah, so we've had issues in Town Hall trying to do Zoom in the hall because of the acoustics. So the first meeting, in discussions with Tony, we thought maybe we could do it in person, and then we can do another community engagement where we can do it over Zoom, because we know we probably will get, a different audience of participants and be able to field questions and feedback from that representative audience. But we will live stream it so people can watch it on TV, just like if it was a town meeting, right? It just, if they want to ask questions and participate, it will be in person.
Should we try to get maybe questions like ahead of time from people who?
Yeah, so we can put that
know.
in the press release and put it and
Okay.
certainly publish it on the website. We have the email address so they can facilitate their questions through there.
Perfect.
We can also, each of us has a different network of family and friends and residents. So if someone can't attend but has a question they want to ask, if they want to send it to us, we can certainly, speak to that question on their behalf. I think that's completely appropriate.
Okay.
How about a mechanism so that those who are watching the live stream can send in a question in real time, either by email or by text or by some other means, so that a
Good
central
idea.
point can receive those and put those questions to whoever is in a position to answer them.
So we have the group email box right now, and we can try doing a couple of tests against that to make sure it's working satisfactory. So we may, say, other than our email addresses that are attached to it, ask, a friend or family, or if you have an alternate email address, testing that to make sure it is working. But I don't see why not. And someone that will have their laptop or tablet can, field those questions, as we're in the hall.
So there would be an official committee email address, which will be teed up and live to receive the input from those sitting at home, correct?
We have an official committee address. It's hpac@nahant.org.
Right, we just need to publicize that to those who cannot attend in person.
Exactly.
Let me check with Tony, Michelle, that maybe we
Mhm.
can so enable the chat mechanism in Zoom, so that
Right.
people watching at
Well, Mark,
home.
we said we weren't going to be able to use Zoom because the acoustics
Oh.
in town hall make it difficult.
Oh, I thought it was just the audio issue that you were talking about.
No, it's both the audio and the acoustics. We tried
Oh.
it with the planning board hearings and it's been challenging. So,
Well, wait a minute, you're gonna stream it but through some other means?
it'll be streamed through YouTube.
Okay. Isn't it possible to stream it using video only without any audio to avoid those problems?
I don't know, but we can ask town hall in terms of the, what they have. I'm going back, I'm
Christian,
going
do
on,
you-
prior history, so. but
Yeah,
those are
I
great
can.
instance.
I can add a little bit of insight. I haven't been in town hall, so well, I shouldn't say obviously, but I haven't been in town hall. We didn't go there when we went to when we did the site tour. We drove by it, but we didn't go inside. So, but the acoustics of those types of spaces, I'm not surprised that that's an issue. We've definitely encountered that in other spaces, and it does really make it difficult to have the two-way part of Zoom. So that it makes it because of the challenges with the audio, it makes it really difficult to facilitate interaction between in-person people and people on Zoom. So, one of the things that we've done in the past is we have done a live stream. I think it wouldn't necessarily make sense to do a live stream without the audio because there will be, John is planning to give a presentation to the folks who are there at the beginning of the engagement event. So actually, I think maybe this might be, I don't want to get too far ahead of what you were discussing, Michelle, but I think some of these questions might be able to be answered if we discussed the format of the meeting
I
that
was gonna say
John
that
was hoping to.
You're spot on in terms of my segue going into the format. So let me just recap for a
Yeah,
moment.
please.
So it's going to be March 8th in town hall. Right now we have it set up for in-person and that we're going to do a live stream video via YouTube. The next thing I wanted to move into is how it's going to be organized in terms of what will be covered, meeting facilitation, either volunteer for the MC role. We can certainly lean on MAPC as well. But if someone would like to represent the committee or I can do it, it doesn't matter. But I'm also, look for collaborative support and participation. So Christian, why don't you start in terms of,
Sure.
how you see the community engagement flowing?
Yeah. So, I'm actually really excited to be doing an in-person forum. I have not done one since 2020. All of the projects that I've worked on have had either hybrid or virtual engagement, and I've only done, if it's been hybrid, I've only done the virtual part. So I'm really looking forward to this. Typically, the way that we will set this up is that we'll have a welcome area where people will be able to sign in. And that's just helpful for us because we like to use that as an opportunity to ask people if they want to sign up for like a update list, for instance, so that we can update them about the next engagement event. We also would like to, this is something that we do on Zoom through registration, which we're not going to be doing this time around, but the benefit of Zoom is that we can collect emails for contact information, but also demographic information so that we can use that to tailor some engagement subsequently. And so we'll have some tablets that people can use to voluntarily provide that information if they're willing to. So it's certainly not required for them to come into the meeting, obviously. It's just there in case they are willing to share that information with us. So we'll have a welcome table that will be facilitated by, one of MAPC staff and or any of you if you're interested. We are planning to provide some refreshments. So I did want to ask if there were local businesses that would be a great source for those refreshments. But then the main room, the way in which John and Alex and I have really talked about this is, and this is pretty standard in terms of how we've done other HPP forums, is that we have a presentation, but before the presentation, people will have the opportunity to interact with some boards summarizing the content from the housing needs assessment. And those boards John has worked on, so I can show you what some of them look like if that's helpful.
Yeah, that would be great.
Great. So why don't I walk through the rest of this, and we can look at the boards in just a
Okay.
second. And if you have questions about anything, just feel free to interrupt me. So the first 30 minutes of the event, while we're waiting for people to actually get there, because we know not everyone will be able to get there right at the beginning of the start time, will be an opportunity for people to be looking at these boards. Each board should have an MAPC staff person and or committee member at the board helping to facilitate that conversation with people as they're coming up, and really walk them through some of the data and information, answer questions, and then we'll go right into a presentation that includes a welcome and introduction. Well, John will give some background on the project. I'm sure Tony will also, and Michelle, maybe you'll also want to speak, and we'll recognize the committee and all of that. And then in the presentation, John and Alex will really go into more detail about the information on these boards and what's in the housing needs assessment. And we're intending for that to include an FAQ, where I need to confirm with John. And so Michelle, maybe you talked about this earlier this week or last week when you met with them, but I don't know if he's intending for that to be a Q&A. Do you remember?
During the community engagement?
Yeah.
Yes,
Okay, great.
I was intending it was going to be Q&A.
Great. It says FAQ on my facilitation guide, and I know that that's not the same as a Q&A, so I just wanted to confirm. But yeah, so there will be a Q&A. That is a great opportunity for if folks have questions and they want to email into that email that Michelle was mentioning. The Q&A is a great place, or the presentation is a great place for us to address those. If it makes sense to do that for everyone to see the answer to. And then after the presentation, John and Alex will be floating around, asking, being there as a resource for people to ask follow-up questions to. But there will also be an opportunity to leave some feedback on existing or on some engagement specific boards. And I can show you what those are, but they're boards that would be soliciting like either like preference voting with dots or sticky notes or comments. And yeah,
How
Michelle.
many boards are you planning to have around town hall in the hall? Because we'll set it up like we would maybe like town meeting.
Yeah.
And so the boards would be on the outside.
Yes, we have 8 boards.
8 boards. Okay.
Is there like foam boards with graphics on them?
Yes. So why don't
on an easel?
Yes, we have
Well,
our
I
own
can give
easels. We will bring all of that. The town doesn't need to worry about that. We've got,
So
I am the
let me-
magician behind all of the meeting supplies. So I will be bringing all of those things.
All
Yeah.
right, so I'm going to give you host, and then once you're
Awesome.
done, just make sure you return it back to me. Okay.
Yes, we'll do.
All right.
I will keep it for myself. No, I'm kidding.
Then you should be all set.
Okay, awesome. Thanks, Michelle. Yeah, so this is an example, or this is a draft of the board. John put these together today, and we're going to continue to refine them. This was kind of like a first pass.
Okay.
So this is basically just like giving people some information about what a housing production plan is. The next board is some more information about like what you were mentioning, Heather, about the reality of being able to afford housing in Nahant. This is another sort of similar board that includes more information about affordable housing affordability versus the income you would need to obtain median rent to afford median housing price and so on. And I'll say that if the these are draft boards certainly, and so if there's something that you would like for John to update, we can certainly talk about that. Or if there are updates that you have to this data from the housing needs assessment, we can make sure that they're reflected in this, because this is just the same information essentially.
Yeah, no, I think this is good. I think it would be helpful after the meeting, if you could just send the PDF out to me and I'll distribute
Sure.
it to the committee. And then we can, look to make sure we're comfortable with the content and all that
Happy
stuff,
to.
any wordsmithing, that kind of stuff. It's always great to have second and third set of eyes. But also given that we're, we have the housing needs assessment, if someone sees something else as a data point that would speak more or resonate more with the residents, maybe we swap things out. And I think
Absolutely.
that'd be a great way for us to keep that collaboration going. Um,
Yes.
Have we seen all the boards now?
No,
No,
there's still a few more.
So this is like an we're calling this one of the engagement boards. This, what should the future of Nahant's housing look like? This is a really high level question, sort of like and we'll be asking people to add comment to this via a sticky note that they can add to the board.
Mhm.
What types of housing should Nahant have? So you can see that in the box, there will be examples of different housing types that are pretty standard from other HPPs that we've worked on. And we'll be asking people to, I think probably dot vote. I have to.
These will be photographs of as-built housing units? Okay.
Yes.
So someone could come up and see what type of house that I'd like to see in Nahant, and they could put like a red sticker on that picture. basically,
Exactly.
right? Okay, that's great.
Exactly. Yeah. So it'll be like, I'm sure there will be all different kinds of housing types, like multifamily, two-family, etc.
Mhm.
All, and then this will just be a map of Nahant, and it'll ask people to sort of put a little sticky where they live.
That's good.
Which, people don't have to do that if they don't want to, but it is fun to see where everyone's coming from.
Yeah.
And those are all of the boards. There's one additional engagement thing that we're planning to do that doesn't involve a board. We are planning to bring a big section of butcher paper, basically, and use that as an opportunity for people to draw or design like the prompt something in response to the prompt, what is your favorite thing about Nahant? So it's really not specific to housing, but it will be an opportunity for people to be creative and really get involved with their sort of artistic side. And we'll have some, art supplies and collage stuff for people to use to add to that.
So once we finalize what the boards are, will you provide talking points? So I guess kind of just thinking ahead a little bit. So the boards get finalized. Obviously, we'll have like a PDF copy kind of in our back pocket for all of the boards. Will you provide talking points? So if there's, different members of the committees supporting one of those boards, they have kind of some themes and ideas to be able to speak to residents on. Because obviously we're going to have to make sure we
Yes.
know the housing needs assessment. And, as residents are going to ask questions of us as the committee. So we want to be as in tune to all of the data as much as we can. And if, obviously we don't have an answer to a particular question, we try to capture that and we can come back to them.
Yes. That is a great request. I'm sorry, Jim. Go ahead.
No, I would just like to suggest two things. One is that when the boards are finalized, that they be put online so people could review them before the meeting.
The public, you mean, the public, not just the committee.
Yeah.
That's right, Mike. Some of the information is a little dense and you can't just walk up to and absorb it all. And the second, on the types of housing, I hope you might have some solar panels and heat pump kind of stuff that somehow to get the environmental element into the conversation.
I'm writing those down and I will send them to John as he continues to refine those boards. Certainly, I think, Jim, those are some great things for people to be adding to the what should the future of Nahant's housing look like, excuse me. Energy efficient homes is definitely something that belongs on that slide for sure.
Can I add something? I definitely think having people imagine like the future is a very important aspect. Like everybody wants to talk about their favorite things in Nahant, and we all have many of them, but definitely gearing people to think about like the vision of the future is crucial.
I would respectfully suggest that this is great. It's in line with what we've been talking about. However, somebody mentioned that it's dense. I think it's very dense, especially for people who are going to walk in off the street.
Mhm.
This is a lot for us to digest, even though we're a small selected group. And there's a hell of a lot of moving parts in this. And I'm really fearful that we will fail to convey the most important parts, despite all of our efforts and good quality graphics and so forth,
Mhm.
and that will provide an opening for the naysayers and the malefactors in town to get busy talking up, ascribing evil motives to the people who are involved in this and generating opposition in the abstract and based on misinformation. So I think it's very, very important that we get our agenda, our objectives for this meeting, everybody on the same page, and everybody on the same page about, what the answers are going to be to the significant questions that are going to be asked. I mean,
I agree.
I for one am not. I would like to get clear tonight, here and now, exactly what. Not so much actions, but recommendations are within the scope or the grasp of this committee and what the decisions are for the town. We know about the 40B, we know about the MBTA. Those may be the simplest. I'm kind of concerned about what Mark was alluding to in terms of other aspects of this process, because I'd not been alerted to them. But if there's anything other than those two issues, I think we need to get them on the table and get a very clear understanding and agreement on what those are, and, if you will, what the pivot points are that are going to influence the committee, because people are going to ask us about that stuff. And I think it is not going to look good if we, as members of the committee, are not able to answer effectively, at least credibly, to the people who show up for this thing.
Can I add to that? Because I agree with that. A few things about what you just said. I think people are looking to this committee to tell the community where these houses are going to be. And I know that's a bit of the elephant in the room, but I also think that being a creative person, walking into a room full of like boards that I can like talk about my feelings and write pictures, it's amazing for me. But I think that might be slightly intimidating for some people to not know what they're walking into. I think the community might expect a sort of like informational thing and not something so interactive. And I'm not saying that we shouldn't be doing that, but I think we need to be clear with the community what the goal, like what you just said, what the goals are here. And I think there's already this sort of preconceived notion of what people want to ask us, and we do need to be ready for that.
Let me jump in here for 1 second. I think the first aspect of this is a housing needs assessment. And I think that's what we're looking at now. I think it's very premature and very dangerous for us to be thinking about at this point in time where this housing is going to be, because there are multiple locations in this town that housing could occur in, and we are not prepared at this point to say where that is going to be. We may all have some idea of where it may occur, but it's not defined, and I think what's important here is to let the public know that we have a housing need in this town, that we need to address it. Where that's going to be is a whole different matter.
But
don't you think people are going to ask that? Like,
Yes.
isn't that
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. You're
Definitely.
spot on, Heather, in terms of what you're saying.
And
But I think
our being perceived as dodging the question is not going to help the credibility of this committee.
we wouldn't be
Is there
dodging the question.
anybody on this committee that can stand up and say all of this housing is going to occur in X, Y, and Z? I'm not, but I'm a member of the board. I'm not.
Oh,
But
but
the
there
town
are
is already talking about preserving land in other places. So how can we be doing both at the same time? So, there are conversations about, certain areas of Nahant that Nahant wants to like keep as green spaces. And are they off the table?
Well,
we're
there's a-
1 square mile.
There's a 3A aspect to this assessment. And part of that is the zoning. And I think at that point, we can start looking at locations where we can start meeting some of our obligations for housing. But to say next week that we know where that housing is going to be is delusional.
I mean, are we ready for a community engagement then?
I think the answer may be no. I think that we may be setting ourselves up for a big blunder in this process if we are not. We don't even know what we want these people to take away from this meeting, other than the fact that we've got a consultant and they've done some nice storyboards. People are going to wonder, what the hell is this for? What's
Mike.
the output?
So wait 1 second. I want to bring
Hold
some
on.
thoughts back full circle. Mark, hold on 1 second. There's a couple of things here. One, there are 2 plans coming out of this project that we're doing as a committee. The housing production plan and the 3A compliance. Okay, we have an agreed upon scope and timeline with the MAPC. And so there are certain objectives that need to get completed. And to achieve those objectives and have those deliverables complete, there are some activities that need to happen. The community engagement feeds into our housing production plan because we need to hear from the community. We need to hear from the residents what their thoughts and ideas are. There could be ideas out there we don't even know about yet. I mean, because all of us have ideas and have certain level of knowledge as well, but there could be something out there I may not be aware of or privy to, and someone will bring that to light. But I don't want to derail the process, and I want to derail the conversation, but I want to make sure that, we think about, we have a timeline and stuff, and we have a budget, and there's a budget, right? There's funding that was already appropriated for this cost. We don't want to go outside of that, because then that means we're going to have to deal with a different aspect of, addressing financial support if we need more time from MAPC.
Well, the contract timelines, the budget and everything else were
Yes,
decided before this committee was even composed. Those are extrinsic constraints that were imposed upon us, and they may not be realistic. So we may be stuck with the consequences of them, but I'm not so sure that this is the best process. We could create a monster by getting this off on the wrong foot with the public.
okay, but
Well,
Mike, let me just one more thing.
Let me jump in, Michelle.
Okay,
One
Mark.
second. Mike, we create a monster if we go into this public hearing and say, we know what the housing needs of this town are, and we know where we're going to correct them. That's creating the monster. That's gonna divide this town. All right, and we don't need that. What we need to do.
Wait,
Let me finish. What we need to do is to educate the town as we are being educated as a committee of what the housing needs of this community are. Because I don't think that the town understands our housing needs and what we need to do to address them. We are not at any stage at a point where we're going to say, this is where it's going to be on the ground. And I think if we go into the committee, this public hearing with that understanding, or try to shove that down people's throats, it's going to be a disaster. I think we address this meeting, this public forum, as a housing needs assessment.
We
Yeah,
haven't begun to make any decisions yet. So there's no way that we could be ramming anything down anybody's throat. What we don't have is a coherent idea of the message that we want to present at this gathering, and people are going to.
And that's why we're having this discussion tonight, is to talk about how we want to formulate that message. Now, I'm gonna pause 1 second, Jim, because Lynn's had her hand raised for a little bit. I want to give her the floor.
Okay.
And then I'll go back to you.
Thank you, Michelle. I appreciate that. I appreciate this dialogue, and having served on this type of a committee in the past with Mark Cullinan, I understand some of the issues and some of the pitfalls. To me, it is important for people to understand that this is a process and that we should actually explain With the report that we've just received, we've got better statistical understanding of the demographics of this community, of the eligibility for approximately 40% of this community to be eligible for affordable housing, not low income, but eligible for affordable housing. And then to explain what that means to people, because we all know there are big assumptions about what that means. So this is informational. This is sharing this kind of statistical content related material. As to the solutions, I think we need to help people understand that there may be several ways of approaching this. We have actually been reassured by the GLAM study to understand that if we accept that and some of the assumptions behind it, we may protect ourselves from from an unfavorable 40B. But that doesn't fully address the housing needs in this community. And so we should actually be open to looking at what those opportunities may be. Our consultants haven't led us down that path yet, and so we shouldn't sort of say the gate is open to that. But people need to understand that this is a process and that they too can gain an understanding and become part of the process. If they want to throw rocks at it, they'll just break windows. It doesn't solve the problem.
All right. Thanks, Lynn. Jim, I know you wanted to speak.
So I just think that we should present this meeting not as we're coming to tell you something. We're here
Sure.
to give you some information and to seek feedback. We haven't made any decisions,
Right.
but we want to hear what people are thinking about these issues.
So
Can
I
I-
think one of the things that I think many of us have been used to seeing in public hearings has been certain boards and committees giving out a lot of information, right? Doing a presentation and then having an opportunity for the audience to speak. What Christian and MAPC are presenting is something that's more interactive, which is probably something that we haven't seen before. Although there's been some of that with, if you think about like the MVP committee when they did some of their work, or open space. So anyone who has participated in those forums and in those meetings have seen some of that go on. And so this is a little bit different for us. So I want to ask this question is for what Christian has proposed in terms of the piece being interactive, is there something we want to claw back and do differently?
Right.
And it gives people an opportunity to think about, excuse me.
So let's put those on the screen again, please.
Great, happy to share them again.
Yep.
I would also say that if I think something that would be very helpful for us to know is like, is there a specific question that you don't see, or a specific data point that I can't remember, one of you mentioned this, but a specific data point that you think would be really salient for community members that we should include on a board so that it gets discussion.
I think people are going to come and want to know, why is this session being held? This committee is being composed for some purpose, and unless we can tell the public what is the potential range of outputs from this committee, it's going to generate suspicion, because everybody knows when you have a session like this, there's something behind it. There's some shoe that's waiting to drop. And unless we can describe what the shoes are that are waiting to drop, we're going to lose credibility. Now, it's complicated because there's at least two and maybe more things we need to decide. And obviously, Mark, nobody's decided anything, but we need to be able to explain what it is that is the range of options that can be decided amongst that's within the ambit of this committee. And I don't believe that's. I mean, yes, we've assessed what the local need is, but I don't think we've remotely touched on what it is the purpose of this committee or the purpose of the meeting in the public eye.
I think at this meeting, the objective is to let people understand and appreciate that we have a housing needs in this community, and it needs to be addressed. How that's going to be addressed is part of as Lynn said, is going to be part of the process as we move forward. But if you ask 8 of 10 people walking down Nahant Road, they won't think we have a housing needs issue in this town.
Okay, that's
I
great.
disagree,
That's,
Mark. I disagree with you with that. I mean, everyone I talk to knows that we have, everyone knows that we have a housing crisis here. I mean, maybe people don't want to admit it because they're really comfortable in their homes. But I mean, right across the street from me, I have 12 families that are being or have been evicted. I spoke at the town meeting 3 years ago asking for us to pay attention to this issue. So I don't think I think everyone knows people are afraid to speak up. And when going into this meeting, we're going to be naive to think that people aren't going to ask us the big question, which is, where are we considering? Not where it's going to be or what it's going to look like or help us pick out the designs, but where are we as a committee thinking this goal, which is why I joined this committee, to build affordable housing in this town, where do we think it might be?
and Mark, everybody agrees that the town should come away from this with the knowledge that there is a housing need in Nahant. Maybe some know it, maybe some don't, and we can accomplish that. And that's great. And I think everybody's in violent agreement on that educational point. And that's point one. It's a little bit complicated, but I think we can probably accomplish that. But everybody is going to then say, so what? What's the point of telling us all of this? Because obviously the committee is about something that is within the power of the town to do, and that it's contemplating doing. And that is the elephant in the room. And that, as Heather says, somebody is going to press us on that in one way or another.
And my response, part of the process.
All right. So I would like to suggest something else, that in the way that we are reframing this, at least it's my basic understanding that we are required by law to meet certain standards in housing availability in Nahant, required by law. And not, this isn't just, let's have a funny little exchange of ideas here. We need to comply with the law. The law requires us to do A, B, and C, A or B or C, and we need to make those choices. But to just say, oh, we want to talk about needs, sure, there can be 1,000 different opinions on that. But what is clear is that the law requires us to do our work.
And some people are going to come there knowing that, and are going to put us to the, going to put our feet to the fire on that.
Can I just interject and ask Michael, if you had to develop a board that people would provide feedback on, what would that board ask? What's the question?
Well, I think the feedback boards that you have described sound to me certainly appropriate. They might not be the end all and the be all, but my concern is information flowing in the other direction, where it's going to be easy to get people to put stickies on the board. I don't know that they're going to be very helpful, because they're going to be in all kinds of directions, and it's going to be impossible to please everybody who has an idea. But taking in ideas, I think, is good, and there may be some more refined ways to do it. But my concern is aligned with what Jim said, because there are some certain things that we know we have to do. Mark may be correct that there's even more that we need to think about than those two issues, but I think we need to be in a position to let people know at least some of what it is that we've been engaged to do. And I don't see that is coming forth in the boards that you all have got here.
Let's assume, Christian, we have a board of a map of the town, and ask people, say we need 100 units of affordable housing. Where do you think it should be located?
Okay.
Now let's put the Post-its on the map. Where do you think it's going to be located? Do you think it's all going to be in one location?
Are you asking me?
No, I'm asking
No.
the committee.
I was gonna say-
No, I
Of
don't think
course
so.
not.
Oh,
People are going to have all kinds of ideas, and some of them will be better informed than others. And so we may learn something from the stickies on the map. That's great. So that's good. You think that's all we need to get out of this session?
No,
Can I
well,
imagine this?
I'm thinking that's what you're saying that we need to have.
What?
Heather, I know you were just about to say something.
Yeah, so I
Yeah.
mean, Christian, you and I talked about this a while back, and honestly, like I imagine this community engagement event more full of like personal stories and kind of trying to pull the community out, like you know, hitting them in their hearts, because I'm a longtime resident, so are my parents. Jim just had an amazing meeting that I watched at the village church, and it was very personal. And I think, and I'm going to say it again, I think the boards might overwhelm people because we're asking them to basically build housing, right? And if that's not our ultimate goal, and I want to respect this process, like that's why I'm part of it. And I'll be the first to admit this is like the first committee I've ever sat on, but this question of essential affordable housing has been stewing in Nahant for many, many years. So like maybe like a slideshow of the assessment plan plus a few sort of like personal stories is all that the community really needs right now. I mean, we might be surprised how people come at us, for our first time out. And, I too want to be prepared to give them the answers that to the questions they may ask us.
Lynn, I see you have your hand raised, but I just wanted, if I may, can I follow up really quickly?
Sure.
Heather, I think that you raise a really good point about the complexity of this data and like the sort of like, or the sheer amount of it, I guess, being overwhelming for folks. And one of the things that I talked with you about in that conversation that you just referenced was having like a boards that represent like the point of view of like a archetype of somebody in town, sort of like parent with like elementary age children. Like how is this relevant to my life? Another board that's sharing sort of like a senior who wants to downsize. How is this relevant to my life? Those are certainly things that we can explore, and we still have a lot of, so what, 3 weeks before the meeting, so it's definitely within the realm of possibilities to include that type of narrative in the engagement for this event, if and it sounds like you think that would be really valuable. Certainly would love to include personal stories too. People have to be willing to share those, so I will put out the call now if anyone has a personal story that they're interested in sharing that they think would make a good point and really develop that story and narrative that Heather's talking about. I would love to see if there's a way for us to develop that into either talking points for the committee members or a narrative that accompanies some of the data so that it makes it a little bit more personal to Nahant. So I see, Lynn, you have your hand raised.
Right. I do. I think the elephant in the room actually needs to be brought out. And I think Jim, I'm sorry I missed Jim's presentation. I fortunately had to go out of town unexpectedly. But having talked with him about it and having read the GLAM report, I think that we may want to actually think about this in a binary way. 40B, it appears, could be we could gain protection from an adverse 40B, it appears, by accepting the GLAM report and the current military housing property is being part of that solution. What is wrong with helping people understand that that's a possibility? I think that may be premature, but what is wrong about that? And number two, that doesn't ultimately address the other issue, the bigger issue, which is actually providing housing opportunities for people within the community, not just in one area, but perhaps in various parts of Nahant. I would hate to see this be ghettoized, quite honestly, in terms of how where affordable housing is, or, you know, that type of housing. So if there are other places where that could be accomplished, we should be open to looking at that. And that may be, you know, that may be duplexes. It may be actually working with accessory units. It may be a series of things. But if that's the type of opportunity that we have, then perhaps we should be able to talk about that within this committee before March 8th.
Thank you, Lynn.
Let me, I think you did bring up the elephant in the room here, Lynn, and I have a personal, you and I go way back on this. We started in what, 2008, and we had a friendly 40B proposition for the town, which the town accepted overwhelmingly. It was the housing crisis, and the market fell out, and we couldn't accomplish that, unfortunately. But I do think that the military house or the Coast Guard housing property does play a role in this ultimately, but it doesn't. I think we make a huge mistake if we think that we're going to meet the 40B thresholds on the back of one community. If we try that, that's going to be a huge mistake. And I think that it can play a role in it, and it should play a role in it, and I will support that. But there are other areas in the town that we can use also to meet that threshold.
I agree with you entirely, Mark, and I'm standing strongly on that basis, because I would hate this committee to actually pin everything on the military housing as accomplishing 40B protection. That really is only half of what we're trying to accomplish here, maybe not even half.
I agree.
But I just wanted to let that elephant out so we could see what color it is, and if it really is an elephant.
So what do we say when people ask us, assuming that the military housing is used for part of the 40B footprint, what else is there to put on the table as other locations for affordable housing, subsidized housing?
We're not
It's
there
not
yet.
subsidized housing.
Yet,
Well,
yeah.
we've got to be
So-
careful about this language.
Yeah, so
really
the
do.
Coast Guard housing is only one element to the housing production plan, and this community engagement will help identify ideas from the community where they think other opportunities are. Now, I know we probably could come up with a list of like 5 to 10, right? But maybe there's something out there creatively we're just not aware of because we haven't heard from the community. I don't want to, speak to others. I mean, we know Coast Guard housing, that's the one on everyone's the tip of the tongue, but there's probably other things out there that we need to, really, analyze and, and look through, and certainly the community engagement will help us with that.
Yeah, my role in this committee, and as you all know, I mean, it was a major point in my campaign as running for a member of the Board of Selectmen, is not to find a threshold or to, figure out how we can solve 40B. My issue here is to address the housing needs of this town. And if we can do that and address the 40B issue, great. But our purpose here tonight is to look at our housing needs and how we're going to address our housing needs, not how we're going to, figure out how to get past 40B or 3A or any of that stuff. Is to address our housing needs as best we can, and if we meet some thresholds by doing that, great. But that's not our mission here.
Wait a minute, I think everybody's probably in violent agreement that we want to improve our available housing stock and maybe I used the wrong acronym or descriptor, but you cannot be saying that we're going to ignore the MBTA requirement or the consequences of 40B. Are you, Mark?
No, I'm not saying that at
No.
all.
No.
I'm not saying that.
Okay.
Oh.
So it's that plus.
Exactly.
Yes.
Okay. That's
But as long as we understand that it's that plus, we are required to comply with the law. We have to figure out a way to do it. There are different opinions on how that may be accomplished. I understand that. I'm happy to express mine in case you didn't know that. But you know, we can just keep talking as friends here. That's all. And I'm not. I have a strong idea of what I would like to see, but as I've thought through this over the last few months, I've changed my opinion. It's expanded. I've taken in and understood things differently, given comments and readings. So, you know, we don't need to fight among each other here.
I just wanted to chime in because I'm noticing a few key sort of points of discussion here. One is the level at which information is being provided and how it's being provided. And that speaks to a little bit to what you were talking about, Heather, what you've been talking about, Michael, in terms of like, you know, this is lots of data, it's complex. How do we make sure that the people who come to this meeting are able to understand it so that they can be as informed as they can? I think the other part of that we're hearing is that there's a lot of sort of there's a lot of questions that people will have that are and maybe some disagreement among committee members about when during the process answering those questions is most important. So I just wanted to share a little bit about what we have done with what I've experienced in other HPPs from the engagement person's perspective, since that's really what my role is at MAPC, is designing engagement processes. We've definitely had this experience. I think this is maybe something that some of you have referenced, of coming into a public forum or workshop where we're asking people for input and ideas, and the response that we get back is, well, why aren't you coming with all of this already figured out? Isn't that what committees do? And I think for a lot of committees, that is what they do. And the response to that is usually, why didn't you ask us? I mean, paraphrasing, obviously, and I know that this might sound a little trite, but the response to that is often, why didn't you ask us for more input on this? How can you just decide these things without consulting with the community? So, you know, when we've gone in with lots of information already and sort of like sites identified, for instance, or specific kinds of housing proposed, that has been the response. And when we go in without having that information and really trying to be more open-minded or more sort of having the process have remained open, a lot of the times we do get some concerns about how we don't have some of that information already decided. So I think all of that is to say is that, like, and I think you said this, Michael, but we're not going to be able to make everyone happy. But I think the least that we can do, and this is really why I think this forum is important happening now, is making sure that everyone who comes to the forum, who visits the Nahant HPP website, has access to the same information and is able to ask questions of people so that they can really decide how they understand the data for themselves, so that way, when we get to the point where we're asking people what type of housing they want, or, you know, like where they want things, they're able to understand some of the bigger picture of the intricacies of housing need in Nahant as it is currently.
So maybe we need to label this first session as basically a broad funnel intake scoop, gathering information, which is step one of a 3 or 4 step process.
Absolutely.
Leading
Yes.
to digestion and feedback with suggestions. And I think that makes plenty of sense. I just suggest that we agree upon and lay out in some form that's accessible that is what's going on, that this is step one of maybe 3 or 4. And number 2, that the intake that we're looking for is to help the committee make recommendations, make decisions and recommendations as to some specific actions that the town is going to take. Now, I'm not sure how Mark would want to frame it. I'll leave that as sort of point 3 that I don't have all the answers to, but points 1 and 2 are obviously the 40B issue and the MBTA issue, which we talked about to begin with. And so maybe we want to have a signboard that says there are those 3 and maybe another objective or decision as to which we want suggestions and input from people.
Mhm. I really appreciate that you've sort of outlined it like that. And that certainly, you know, as you were describing your suggestion, Michael, I was thinking that we likely need another board that's sort of like a sister board to this one that's on the screen, that because this one really describes the basics of a housing production plan, but it sounds like we need one that also says, like, here we are at, this is where we are at this point in this process, here's where the other points of, like, the points of feedback will be, and this is the type of feedback that will be, and this is how we'll use the things that you're telling us today.
And I also forgot to mention that we need to somewhere make it overt that we're going to explain to people why it is that Nahant has a housing need, or point out, tell people to the extent that there are those who do not know that we have a challenge here, even if the 2 legal requirements were not there, that we are not meeting the needs of the community, and that's part of our objective as well.
Mm-hmm. I think that was maybe the goal of these 2 slides, the who struggles with boards, excuse me, who struggles with housing costs in Nahant, and can you afford to rent or buy a home? And it sounds like we could be more explicit, is what you're saying.
Yeah, I think you need to hit people over the head a little more firmly, because this has a tendency, I'm afraid, even to those who are in the mix, that it's a little bit complicated to digest. So
Sure.
I suggest these boards could be supplemented with some bullet point boards to begin with.
Mm-hmm. Or maybe a handout.
Christian, I think your idea of putting this coming meeting into a context is a really good one. We're going to be doing A, B, C, and D. This is B. We have C and D still coming. We're in a process. So I like that.
Can we outline that process in a timeline? Because that's what I would want to get out of it. I'd want to be educated, and then I'd want to know, okay, what's next?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So Kristen, I think this is a good point to take back to John, and this
Yes.
is something I raised earlier, is having that timeline so people understand, here are the deliverables, here's our timeline, and this is here's where we started, here's where we are, and here's what we need to go, where we're going to end, and here's what we need to accomplish. Mm-hmm. Right? I've said, we had this meeting in discussion with Tony about it, and I said, you need to come back with that, because I feel like it's needed, and this is definitely proving my point with the committee tonight.
Yes.
So we send emails to John by way of suggested input or additional slides or whatever. John gets those from several sources, digests them, and consults with Michelle as to whether an additional meeting is needed, and if so, whether the consultant needs to be a part of it.
Yep. Sounds good.
I don't want to commit something for John.
We can't commit to that only because we have contractual arrangements right now regarding number of meetings. I think what we can do is, Christian's been going through the boards. We can do a couple of things to Patty's suggestion. One is the outline piece, right? The timeline and outline piece, I'm going to have to take offline. I'm going to have to go back to John, because that is, again, a point I've asked for, and we're still waiting for that. But what we can do is, eliminate what is on the slide. What are the 5 to 8 questions or taglines we want to present to the community if we were to go forward the community engagement.
Well, but Michelle, we can have meetings that don't involve the committee without affecting the budget.
Yes, the committee can meet on its own, and we can definitely do that. And then I can say, here are the 8 things that we want to see. And then have MAPC design and build the boards, socialize them. We can meet and agree, and then finesse or make changes, and then have MAPC revise them. I think that's what you're looking for, Michael. Is that right?
I think that's a way to go. Yeah, that would achieve the purpose without busting the budget.
Okay. So, all right, I want to be efficient with everyone's time tonight. So Christian, I think one of the takeaways is send me the PDF of where you guys are so I can get it out to the committee. We'll likely have to schedule some time next week so we can go through just specifically the community engagement and what we want to have presented. Let me just recap. So we're going to have the meeting in March. It's going to be an interactive forum with the community. We're going to have some of these storyboards around town hall with members of the committee that will be able to speak and support to them. We'll have talking points for each of the boards. Our hope is to inform the community about the purpose of the committee, the scope, the goals and objectives that we need to accomplish on completing a housing production plan and compliance with 3A. But more importantly, it's around the housing production plan and why this is important, why Nahant needs to achieve this. There are certain statutory implications. And I'm sure, members of community are going to continually, hopefully follow this. And we want to also get this information out in advance on the town's website so people can see these and, certainly bring their ideas and questions to the community engagement. So let me just stop there in terms of summary and see if we're in agreement. Anything I missed?
I see Michael's giving us thumbs up.
I feel good about that.
One thing I also just wanted to add to that, Michelle, is that, and I can explore this with John, is developing some of that narrative, those narrative points that Heather raised.
Yes, the personalization. Thank you.
And that might be more suited to like a not a board, but to like a handout that people can take home with them. And then I know that someone else asked this during the conversation that we just had, but it is MAPC's practice to just put all of this information, anything that people would get access to at the meeting. So the presentation that John would be working on, the boards, the I mean, those are the two big things that I'm thinking of.
Handouts, all that is,
it's all public record, and it's our practice to put those on the website as materials that people can access, even if they can't come to the meeting. We do that for everything else, and I don't see why we wouldn't do that for this.
Okay, fantastic. And I guess the other thing is, what is your timeline to get the press release out? Because that's another thing we want to make sure we back into.
So now that we have I think we still need to confirm the time. We started talking about that and then quickly started talking about other things.
Into other topics, but that's okay. We'll come back to that. So time. So I heard 7. I heard 7:30. Is there a particular time people are more keen to, less keen to?
I like 7:30 because it allows people to get home, have a little bite to eat, and then can spend a couple of hours dealing with it.
I prefer 7.
I would suggest that the half hour that the Christian suggested is sort of a ramp up time, begin at 7, and then the presentations begin at 7:30.
I would agree.
Give the public an opportunity to kind of walk around the hall, look at the boards, drop questions into a question and answer box, sign in, that part.
Yep.
Okay. So
that would mean that the advertisements would say that the thing begins at 7, even though we anticipate presentations start at 7:30.
Yeah. So I'm going to just put the schedule on paper right now. So from 7 to 7:30, it's check-in, for members of the community, and at 7:30 presentations would start.
And we can make sure that those 2 times are on the press release and the
Mhm.
outreach materials, so that way
Yep.
people know.
And Michelle, I would just suggest that it be described, the 7 o'clock be not only check-in, but storyboards or whatever we want to call them are available to inform the public. In other words, to say that it's more than just a check-in. So people are not thinking if they show up at 7, they're going to check in and sit with only their thumbs to twiddle.
No, that 7 to 7:30 period is going to be interactive for members of the community to come in, check in, walk around, look at these storyboards, talk to all of us, right? So there's
Right.
going to be some of that stuff going on, and our ability to collect information along with representatives from MAPC. Okay.
Yeah, I just think you need to come up with a quick phrase to describe the 7 to 7:30 time period. Yep.
I can work on that with MAPC. All right. Anything else for this? I know we'll probably likely have to meet next week to kind of go through it one more time and discuss a little bit more what we want to see on the storyboards as well.
I'm pretty comfortable with, and I'm glad for our discussion tonight.
Okay.
And I agree with Mike and Lynn and Heather that it's important to state upfront what we hope to accomplish in this meeting and what we don't expect to accomplish at this meeting. And I think by doing that, we can, because I think Mike is right. I mean, there are people who are going to come in here saying, well, where's the affordable housing going to be? That's what we want to know. And we need to let people know we're not going to be answering that question tonight.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
We're not there yet, right?
What-
We're collecting information from everyone.
Well,
This is
and letting people know that decision has not been made, that the decision is still in process, so that it's impossible for the naysayers to, start spreading lies about what the upshot's going to be.
Well, yeah, and also letting people know that they're part of the decision.
Right.
Like
Yes.
that they have voices. That's why they're here. We are
Exactly.
working together for one goal, and we want as many voices in on this conversation. Like that's especially important to me, that anybody who wants to have a say can come to any of us and speak their mind.
That's right.
That's
Lynn.
why we call it an engagement.
Yep.
Right.
So as the person who let the elephant in the room, I did that for rhetorical reasons tonight. I want to be very clear with you. And I want to have the solemn promise that if anyone is asking this question on the 8th or beforehand, we are in process. I believe this so firmly. But
Agree.
I just wanted to make that disclaimer as to why I did that. It's to
Agree.
get this dialogue out and to say, we're not going to talk about it, quite honestly, until the process is done.
All right.
Lynn, we're going to get it out and we're going to talk about it. We're right.
I don't want
mean,
the solutions being proposed, Jim.
There are. I'm not.
Well, the
we have
committee's
to
not
be able to share opinions. That's all I'm saying.
Well, we don't need to propose solutions to be able to outline some of the questions that we have to answer. That's the distinction. Does that make sense? Do you agree with that, Lynn?
I do. I just don't want everything to be resting on one piece of property. That's all.
Fair enough. Although I mean, in that, to assist in that problem, it's probably a good idea for people to canvass their visual memories of the town and begin to think about some of the additional options.
That's a great point. Very great point, Mike.
What would those be? Like I can't honestly think of anything.
And so Heather, you're going right down that path. I mean,
Well,
Yeah,
we need to
I've
think
been on
about.
that path for a while. Like I
We need-
can't change what I've been thinking about for years. Like I mean, as a committee, if there are other options, like I'd like to hear a couple more what other people are thinking. I don't really, I mean, where? Lowlands? you
Well,
know,
as we-
like behind the police station.
As we go through the process, Heather, I can assure you there'll be, this will be discussion. There'll be
And-
other options.
Okay.
So
And besides,
let's,
even if people don't think of them or bring them out today, somebody from the public is going to. Every single, element of eligible property will get brought up sooner or later.
and they're all elements into the housing plan. Okay,
Right.
because the end result is coming up with the plan. So I want to make sure people still have that ingrained in their mind. So I'm gonna ask Christian, do you want to return the host back to
Yes,
me?
happily.
And I think we've exhausted this topic, but we'll come back to it very soon. And it will likely be a meeting next week. The next item we had was the discussion of the GLAM stand tech analysis. You know, this was an important one. I know we've covered some of it already on Coast Guard housing. I wanted to see if there was anything else beyond what I've heard tonight. People have read the report, obviously, and have gone through it. Was there anything else in the report? Because again, it's a one element to our housing production plan. Anything else that we didn't talk about from that GLAM analysis that we want to cover? Doesn't seem like it is, because we've talked a lot about Coast Guard housing. Okay. All right. Is there any other questions for the committee? Any other input that folks need to raise?
What, can you, once again, or maybe send us an email that describes what the firm deadlines are that are built into the contract, like when, how the, well, how many more options we have to meet with the contractor for one?
Mhm. Yeah.
Great.
I have that as a takeaway. So thanks, Mike. So here's what I see as next steps. Christian will get me the slide boards. I think it's important to look at the calendars for next week for another meeting, having it more focused on preparing for the community engagement. Can folks, school vacation. So I think for some it may be difficult to meet, but I can try to collect feedback over email from you. But would folks be able to meet on the 23rd?
Of February?
Yes.
No, sorry.
Okay. No,
Nope.
that's okay. So Lynn was a no. Heather, I think you were a no, right?
I'm away. Thank you.
Okay, that's okay.
I can do it, but it's uncomfortable.
All right, but everybody else could meet and I'll check with Patrick. Okay. Let's hold a meeting for 6:30 next week. Yeah, we'll get an agenda out to everybody on that. All right. I don't believe we had any old business from the prior meetings. New business, I just had couple of things. I think Heather, you wanted to further talk about community impact fees?
Yeah, we can table that.
You sure? Okay.
Definitely.
The only other new business I had, and it's just mostly just a general reminder, I think folks may have received the email from Diane Dunphy, the town clerk, about taking your open meeting law training. So I just want to make sure folks are reminded to please complete that and complete it timely and send your response and update back to Diane on that.
And just to let people know, there was an earlier version of state conflict of interest training. I took it and got the
Yes.
certificate and submitted it, and it's no good because this is a new program and
Yes.
everybody has to start over.
Yes, yes. It's funny that you bring that up. We all at MAPC have to start over too.
I
So
completed mine today, Heather.
we're in the same boat. Yeah.
Excellent.
Michelle,
Okay.
could you possibly send us all the link to that? I know I
Sure.
have not done it yet.
Sure. I'll get
It
that. out
takes
to
about
folks.
45 minutes.
Yeah,
Great.
it's very short.
It's actually pretty good, though.
Okay, great. All right, I think at this time we can open it up to citizens forums. If there's any members of the public that have questions for the committee or any comments, if you can raise your hand, we'll unmute you and you can certainly have you speak. If we have anything in the chat, let me check. I don't see anything. Okay. If there's no comments from the public, then could I get a motion to adjourn?
So made.
Is that Jim? Thank you.
Yep.
Second,
And second by Mike. So roll call vote. Michael,
aye.
Mark,
Aye.
Patty,
Aye.
Heather,
Aye.
Lynn,
Yes.
David,
Aye.
Jim,
Aye.
and the chair is aye. We will adjourn at 8:05 p.m. Thank you, everyone. Stay tuned for updates from me and have a great evening.
Good night,
Thank you,
everybody.
Michelle.
Good night.
Thank you very
Thank
much.
you, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
It's nice to see
Bye-bye,
you all.
everybody.
Bye, Kristen.
Bye, Christian.